this song. I hate this song. I hate this song. We hate this song. I hate this song. This song. Ska sucks. And if you stupid smart. And if you don't believe me, you're a smart.
You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda and ska music? What? That doesn't sound right. Let me explain. So, first, this is a bonus episode of Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. It's a bonus episode because we already did a full episode about the song Ska Sucks on episode 12, and we found more information. So we're making an appendix bonus episode. Also, Keith isn't on this episode. Keith is doing some other stuff right now. And so I had an opportunity to make something about Ska Sucks based on some recent developments that I have discovered, and I just kind of rolled with it. So a few weeks ago, a kind listener pointed out that a new book called In Defense of Ska is slated to be released by Clash Books in April 2021, and the author of that book, Carnes, had published an excerpt related to Propaganda's Ska Sucks on punknews.org. And I read it, and it was just a delight. So I got in touch with Aaron. And getting in touch with Aaron led to a rabbit hole that became this episode. Aaron and I had a great chat about being a fan of ska, why he wrote his forthcoming book, the saga and story of Ska Sucks and the meaning of the song, and the research behind writing the chapter, as well as some additional information about the book. A central component of our chat involved an infamous rebuttal song called A Message to You, Chris, written by Winnipeg ska band Whole Lotta Milka for their 1998 full-length Got Milka. In the song, Whole Lotta Milka sings back in response to Ska Sucks and then even launches into a recreation of Stick the Flag Up Your Ass from How to Clean Everything. So after my chat with Carnes, I contacted Sam Thompson, the host of Winnipeg's own Witch Police Radio and friend of the podcast, and also massive propaganda and ska fan. And he's also a member of the former Winnipeg ska band Grandpa's Army, and I had a chat with Sam. And Sam and Aaron helped me contact Greg Crow and Jeff Crow, who have no relation, who are two members of Whole Lotta Milka. So a lot of threads got woven to create this bonus episode, and it was kind of like one stepping stone led to another, and then before you know it, I have a whole bunch of new information to bring all of you. So this bonus episode is jam-packed. We have a full interview with Carnes, which will then go into the song A Message to You, Chris, which I am republishing with permission from Whole Lotta Milka, and then a full interview featuring Greg and Jeff from Whole Lotta Milka and Sam from Witch Police Radio. The episode also ends with something kind of fun, because Sam's former band, Grandpa's Army, performed a version of Ska Sucks at the Winnipeg Ska Festival Skalloween, which we talk about in the interview, in the year 2000. So we have a soundboard recording of Grandpa's Army from Winnipeg playing Ska Sucks at a ska festival in Winnipeg almost 21 years ago. So there's a lot of unexpected information in these interviews as well, talking a lot about the context in which Ska Sucks was originally written. And Greg, Jeff, Sam, and Aaron brought so much more to our episode 12 that this was just a no-brainer for me to make. So if you look in your show notes in your podcast player, I'm going to also put a link to pre-order Aaron Carnes' In Defense of Ska. And I highly recommend you also go check out Witch Police Radio, a DIY podcast about the Winnipeg music scene, which is also highly involved with the Manitoba Podcast Festival. So huge thanks to Sam for all your help and support the past several months. Thanks to Aaron for coming on the show to talk about the book. And thanks to Greg and Jeff for giving us some early 90s ska Winnipeg context and stories that really round out what I think that we did for episode number 12, but just shed so much more local context onto the original version of Ska Sucks. So this is a fun one, folks. Ska Sucks is, interestingly and arguably, my least favorite propaganda song of all time, and I had an absolute blast making this appendix episode about Ska Sucks. So, first up, enjoy my chat with Aaron Carnes, and then my chat with Greg Crow, Jeff Crow, and Sam Thompson.
Ska sucks, and it's easy, you're just stupid fuck. And if you don't believe me, you're smart. We fell into tools, stupid fuck. That's only you for fuck. And if you don't believe me, you're smart.
Aaron Carnes, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda and the appendix bonus episode for Ska Sucks.
Hi, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
It's wonderful to have you here, Aaron. Just for those listeners out there who don't know who you are and what you do, can you briefly introduce yourself for the audience and let them know what you do?
Sure. I have a book coming out next May called In Defense of Ska. And it's a collection of essays that revolves around the topic of ska, but also the topic of defending ska as a respectable genre that people could look past the stereotypes and actually see that it's a rich genre with a long history, but also a diversity of bands that are political, bands that are emotional, bands that are everything, not just the 5 or 6 bands that got really popular on MTV that sort of have taken over the narrative to a lot of people of what ska is. So that's kind of the main purpose of my book. And every chapter is sort of a standalone essay that it touches on that theme in some way. And one chapter I wrote was about the song Ska Sucks. So
awesome. Well, that's great. And so listeners of this podcast will know that we did an episode for Ska Sucks ages ago. And I took an approach to that episode, which I was telling you a little bit about off air, that I took Chris's challenge of ska sucking in his proclamation in the song to discover the history of ska music. And I went back to like 1959, Kingston, watching the This Is Ska documentary, discovering Byron Lee, listening to Jimmy Cliff, Toots, Desmond, everything. You know, I went as deep as I could researching for that episode, but I realized that I overlooked a little bit more context regarding Winnipeg and the writing of this song. And we're going to get into all this, and I'm super stoked. But before we do, I want to know why you care about ska in general as a genre, so much so that you would go to the tremendous workload of writing a book. How did you come to care so deeply about this genre?
Oh, sure. Oh, and can I just say too, before I dig in, that my book is on sale for pre-order already, even though it releases on May 4th. So people can go to my publisher's website, which is clashbooks.com, and they can pre-order it. They'll actually get it in April, which is a little earlier than the official release, which is May 4th.
Oh, nice. Well, I saw that Mike from Hard Girls reviewed it recently, didn't he? I think he was posting about it on Twitter saying that he had read it and that he really liked it. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, Mike and I are old friends. We're actually, I live in Sacramento, but I used to live in San Jose. So we used to both live in San Jose. And actually, funny story too about Mike is I'm the editor, the music editor at the Good Times newspaper in Santa Cruz. And Mike, well, before the pandemic, at least, Mike was one of the writers that worked under me.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I saw
Yeah,
that he
yeah.
reviewed that and I love that band. So when I
Yeah,
saw
they're a
that
great
Mike from
band.
Heart, yeah, Mike was like, this book is fantastic. I was like, okay, you have my attention now. And then I saw the propaganda chapter and I was like, holy smokes, my brain is going to explode because we did this Ska Sucks episode. And now here you are. And I'm going to do a part 2 on arguably the song that propaganda probably hates the most in their entire discography. So
Oh yeah.
which is actually kind of poetic if you think about it. You know what I mean? Like punishing listeners with multiple episodes about one song where the band doesn't even like that particular one. It's like, why can't you do 2 episodes about Anti-Manifesto? Why does it have to be Ska Sucks? But I just found it to be so funny. So anyway, so I'm so sorry, Aaron. Tell me why you love ska so much. Tell me a little bit about your interest in the genre.
So when I was a teenager, let's see, I graduated high school in 1993. So before I graduated high school, like 1992, I discovered ska. I just took an interest in music that was that was not mainstream. I just, I grew up in this small town called Gilroy. Nothing much happening there, but it's on the southern tip of the California Bay Area, and so there was this allure to what was happening in the clubs in San Francisco and Oakland and San Jose and Santa Cruz. So I was really fascinated by it, and I would just try to find out about all these bands. And through that process, somebody recommended I check out Skank and Pickle, which is,
Mike
they're
Park.
from that, yeah, they're from that area, but they're also, they toured constantly.
Yeah.
And that first show, which was in 1992, I was at a club called One Step Beyond in Santa Clara, just totally blew my mind because I didn't have any context for it, but I was like, this is amazing. This band's amazing. Their show was like almost like a circus show. It was so crazy. This is like early Skank and Pickle when they were a little bit more like zany, but it was like unicycle. The bass player was on a unicycle. Just the band members were Mike Park and the bass player were stage diving like every 5 minutes.
Nice.
Mike Park, he had a song called Asian Man. And before that song, he invited, or more, I would say more demanded, all the Asian people to get on stage with him for the song. So it was just like all this energy and like all these kind of bits that went with it. But the music was so good. It was so catchy. And it was like so much energy, but not angry. Like it was really fun. And the scene was really inviting. Like every kind of person was there, whether they were like metalheads or hippies or whatever. And they were all just like one cohesive scene. It was no sense of elitism or even like a scary vibe, which I kind of got a scary vibe from some of the underground music that I was into.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a kind of an innocent kid. I'd go to like Primus before they were a big band, and it was like these kind of big scary dudes, and like, am I even welcome here sort of feeling, but definitely did not get that feeling from Skank and Pickle. And then after I got the CD. Actually, funny, a young Cherry Poppin' Daddies.
Oh yeah,
played. They were the first opening band, and they were like a mishmash of ska, funk, and jazz swing stuff. And I got their tape too. And from there, I just was like ska. I just started digging into this music, ska, and eventually I had a band before that, and soon after that we became a ska band because that's the music that I loved. So
nice.
But the reason that it developed to me writing this book at this point in my life has to do with the fact that I became a music journalist around a decade ago, and just really came into contact with how the music failed to gain respect from journalists and from readers and from people in general. And in a way, it almost kind of became more and more of a joke as the years passed since the 90s, to where people were viewing it as this sort of trend that happened in the mid 90s. Like it kind of came and went, but that wasn't actually the experience of ska. I mean, ska was a healthy, vibrant underground scene in the US for 15 plus years before it became an MTV trend. And before that, it was two-tone in England. Before that, it was in Jamaica. And even through the 80s and 90s, it became global. There was there was a scene in all over Europe. Mexico developed a pretty phenomenal scene in the 90s, and it got really big in the 2000s, and now it's even bigger. So, and then when ska supposedly died, it didn't actually die, it just went underground. And there's tons of energy right now for brand new ska bands that have started within the last 5 years.
Oh,
So
cool.
there's like this, people don't understand this about ska, they just think it was a trend. And so that's part of the thing that irks me as a music journalist and as a person that loves this music, and as a person who found ska to be their first, music that they really connected with. It's like people make fun of it, but they don't actually know anything about it.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, like, I grew up in the '90s in St. Louis, and so I was surrounded by fantastic ska bands. I mean, MU330
Oh yeah.
is so legendary, and they were a local band to me. I was seeing them starting in like late 1997, I think is the first time I saw them, and then that spawned off into the Rabies and Orange Tree and Jimmy Got Hustled and Fat Cactus and Dumb Luck, and like this great little St. Louis ska scene. And we even had a ska festival called Ska-orama at this massive ballroom in the city. And, so it was such a vibrant thing and surrounding me when I was in a punk band, but we played with those ska bands all over the suburbs in St. Louis, and we would play shows and it would be packed out and we would be the only punk band on the bill. And it was so cool. But, I'm curious about like, if you personally have like a favorite era of ska, like whenever you are around at home, like what do you find yourself going back to, like across the different eras of ska? What's your go-to if you're just chilling out at home?
Well, I would argue that all eras have really good bands and not so good bands, a mixture. But I think you can't really do better than the two-tone era, because that was just that was like 5 or 6 phenomenal bands that not only started it but were the ones that got popular as well. And they were there was a very heavy political context for them, and that they addressed politics in a very overt way while being top 40 pop stars in England. It was a very unusual time where you had these bands scoring top 10 hits with having real meaty lyrics and a real purposeful identity, to say we're about, fighting racism, and we're about fighting Thatcherism, and we're about commenting on the crumbling economy. And it's like, and they dealt with being anti-racist in a way where they got opposition. It wasn't just hey, we're against racism and everyone applauds. It wasn't like that for them. They dealt with Nazis coming to their shows and Sieg heiling them, trying to challenge them, and them having to be confront it and say, get out of here, you're not welcome. Our message is anti-racism. So, and the music was so good. All those bands, every single one of those bands that was on the two-tone label and was considered two-tone. Like Bad Manners were not on two-tone label, but they're sort of considered as, because they were part of that scene. All great bands, all great songs.
Nice. And I was like really even amazed with like even the newest Specials record. There's like a song in there called like Vote or something like that. And it's like, if you vote for me. And it's so creepy and so beautiful. And I loved everything about it. And I was like, oh my God, I screwed up by overlooking so much of this stuff. When you talk about the politics and like the subversiveness of it, I absolutely love that, because that's actually kind of a recent discovery for me, embarrassingly. You know what I mean? So like what you're saying is something that I'm sort of just picking up on now at 37. And so that's kind of cool, I think, because it's challenging me in a new way to examine some of the stuff that I've, been tangentially attached to for many years, but missed the boat.
Yeah. No, like it's true. It's true of all eras too. I mean, MU330, the band that you grew up around, was there's one of my favorite bands from the 90s, and they put out, their album Crab Rangoon. One of my favorites is so like good. A heartbreaking breakup album, influenced by Pinkerton, Weezer's Pinkerton, at a time when everyone wrote that record off. It was a commercial and a critical flop, but Dan Podhast was like really into that record, and he wrote a ska record that was totally like, you can hear elements of that, and totally unusual album. It didn't even really get very, very far, but it stands the test of time. And then He continued to write really good songs. I love the KKK Highway song from their
Yeah.
last official album. I mean, there's a song right there. It's they're making a statement. It's kind of funny, but they're totally making a statement about the state of, racism in this country in, at 2000, the early 2000s when they wrote it.
Yeah, Dan is like a local legend too, where I grew up, and
Mhm.
it's just so fantastic because you'll go out to like a bar or something like Blueberry Hill in St. Louis, and like Rob Bell will be sitting there at the bar, just hanging out, and it's just so rad. It's like, oh my god, dude, I was right in front of your trombone. You almost hit me in the face with it when I was a kid, and I'm just so glad to shake your hand and meet you. But so, Aaron, you're on a podcast about where we talk about individual Propagandhi songs,
Yeah.
and I'm curious if you're a fan of Propagandhi.
Oh yeah, great band. Love Propagandhi.
Tell me about your fandom of the band over the years.
Um, well, I'm not. I wouldn't say like I'm a huge fan. I'm more of a casual fan of Propagandhi.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, yeah. Me and punk rock, I think, are, punk rock's not my favorite genre, although I do like some punk rock and I listen to some. So the early stuff in the '90s, how to clean everything. Is that, am I saying the name right? Yeah, the one that's definitely classic. And the other stuff they did in the '90s.
Yeah, there's Less Talk More Rock and the stuff on Fat and stuff like that. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, and I totally love and respect Chris Hanna's politics and everything that he stands for in his songs, and that's what always kind of was odd to me about Ska Sucks. Like here you have a guy that's really saying a lot about capitalism and racism and these really important issues, and he also has got to say something about ska. I mean, that's kind of how it sounds or kind of seems, right, to the random fan with no context where that song came from. And but that's not really what the song's about. Actually, it's not about dissing ska.
Yeah, let's get into that. So we're discussing Ska Sucks by Propagandhi, and this will be appearing in your book, which you wrote about, and I read in a advanced excerpt of the book on punknews.org. But when do you first remember hearing the song Ska Sucks? Like, did you like it? Did it put you off? Like, how did you feel about it when you first heard this song sort of, aping the ska rhythm, but dissing it at the same time?
I heard it. I definitely heard it at the time when it came out. My feeling about it, which I would say most of my peers felt, although there was some differing opinions, we all kind of thought it was funny. And we all thought, it's a good song for one thing. And it's funny that it's a ska song that says ska sucks. That's hard. And most ska people have a sense of humor about themselves. So it wasn't like this big, like, oh no, we're so offended. And you had ska bands at the time that would just cover the song. I mean, it was like the idea of being ironic about it was just super common. And that's just kind of how most people that were ska fans took it.
Nice. I remember hearing some covers. Some of the ones that I really like are Big D and the Kids Table has a great version. Against All Authority has a fantastic version.
Oh yeah, both of those are great. Yeah,
absolutely. So what I want to know is I want you to tell me a little bit about what you learned about researching this song, going back to the 90s. And, I'm curious what you found out about like the Winnipeg ska scene in the early 90s, which bore this song. You know what I mean? I want to know about like the context and what you learned when you were researching for the book.
Well, actually the song was written in the late 80s.
Oh, interesting.
So, and it wasn't really about the ska scene. It was really more about the punk scene. This is kind of like early Propagandhi. They had a punk scene. It was pretty small. And there were these Nazi skinheads who would show up and they would just wreak havoc and they would just overtake everything. And I guess, the Nazis are every Nazi, every Nazi scene's a little different, but these ones were, ska fans for some reason. So much irony to dissect there, but that's just how it is.
And the thing is, like, the listeners of the show are very discerning and they will absolutely know what you're talking about. And that irony will not be lost on them, I assure you.
So Chris and the rest of the band, they were sort of being passive about it at first because they just felt like, I don't even know what to do about this. These guys are showing up. We don't want them here. They know we don't want them here, and then that's part of what they're getting off on. So the band, bunch of fucking goofs from Toronto, they came to play Winnipeg, and I'm not sure if they witnessed it or if Chris and them just told them about it, but that band was just like, you gotta take a stand. You can't just let these guys, take over the scene.
Yeah.
What we don't have a problem in Toronto. You know why? Because we just kicked their asses.
Yeah.
Done. They're cowards. And so, they thought about this and they were just like, well, I don't know if we're quite up for
fisticuffs,
getting in a fight.
Yeah.
So what else can we do to sort of be, take a stand? And so Chris wrote Ska Sucks, and it was a way to annoy them, a way to like insult them, a way to kind of single them out. And that's the purpose of that song. And that's where it came from in the late 80s in Winnipeg.
So the purpose of it sort of fits the mission of propaganda in like the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, exactly.
You know the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it also makes sense too, in terms of like, Chris has said, and you can kind of tell that he's like, I don't hate ska, but he wrote it in 89 or late 80s, whatever. There was no money to be made in ska in the late 80s. So it obviously, like, people in the mid 90s heard the song and it sounded like it was addressing this thing where ska bands were suddenly on MTV, but that was not even happening. And in fact, when it even got released on Fat Records, it was only like 1993. And at that point, there still was no mainstream ska revival at that point. So obviously it wasn't, I mean, I think Mighty Mighty Bosstones had a major label deal in 1993, but they didn't have a hit single until years later. So it was, the idea of ska being a big thing in 1993 was still absurd.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was something that never like added up for me for the timeline, because I know that like in my middle school, the first Real Big Fish and Goldfinger records came out. And I guess that was in 6th or 7th grade when those records came out. And those blew up pretty big. And I remember having them both on CD, but How to Clean Everything was already out for several years by that point.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So I want to know about a little bit about the research process that you went through to find out this information about the context of this song. What did you do? Who did you talk to?
So I did reach out to Chris in multiple ways. I never got him to interview. I did actually, here's a funny story. I don't remember if I said this in the book or not, but I emailed different ways. I emailed the labels. I emailed every propaganda, whatever. No response. I asked my friend who at Punk News, I was like, have you ever interviewed Chris? What do you think I should do? He's like, if you want to talk to Chris, you got to send him a handwritten letter. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. So I wrote him a handwritten letter. I said, hey, I would love to interview you for my book. It's about Ska Sucks. I know you're probably sick of talking about it, but I would like to present the real story behind it,
Yeah.
Because I heard rumors, but I wanted to verify it. And, I never got a response. So, but I also was familiar with the response song, a whole lot of Milka, a message to you, Chris. I knew that I wanted to talk about that as well as the real story behind Ska Sucks. So I reached out to them early in the process, and they were really responsive. So I interviewed them early on, and I got that whole story, which we can go into in a minute.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
They told me, they basically said, yeah, the story, they told me what the story was, but they couldn't really be a reliable source. But they just kind of said, keep looking, basically, you'll get a primary source that is credible. And then I did find it, the place that you can find Chris telling the story is on Turned Out a Punk.
Yeah.
One of his appearances on that, he tells the whole story. So that was able to have, in his words, him say these things that I had heard rumors about, and I was able to piece it together through that.
Yeah, man, that interview that he did with Damian Abraham on that podcast is absolutely fantastic. after I read your chapter, I had already listened to Chris's interview with Damien ages ago. But after I read your chapter, I went back and listened to it with new ears, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. So I love the fact that you were able to tie that thread and find that and just keep digging and not giving up, because, you know, he probably was annoyed that Damien even wanted to talk about it in the first place. You know what I mean? He's probably like, oh God, I can't believe I'm already on the phone. I got to answer this question.
Oh yeah, you can hear it. And he's like, what did he say? He's like, so I want to talk about that song that's plagued you or something like that. And they both
Yeah.
kind of laugh. So yeah,
Oh my God.
you can feel the awkward tension in that. Yeah.
That is so funny. So Whole Lotta Milka was a ska band from Winnipeg who I think is at this point probably most well known for their rebuttal song, A Message to Chris, in which they rebut the lyrics to Ska Sucks. And then they also play the riff of Stick the Flag Up Your Ass at the end of the song from Propaganda's first record, which is super cool. So tell me about that interview with Greg and the folks from Whole Lotta Milka. How did that process go for you?
So yeah, I mean, I think locally they're probably known well beyond that song, but I think in terms of outside of that area, that's the thing that's kind of gotten out of there. So that was a really interesting interview because I didn't know some of the backstory of that band until we were talking about it. And Greg is a big Propaganda fan. So that's part of the backstory. He's a big fan. He knows what Ska Sucks is about, actually. He knows that it's not a diss on ska. However, even knowing that it wasn't a diss on ska, he still felt like, I need to say something about this. I need to like say, hey, ska doesn't suck, basically, because it's not so much that he's rebutting Propaganda. He's rebutting the culture's interpretation of the song and how they're all saying, yeah, ska sucks, so that's really the driving force behind it.
It's so cool because, I would be at shows in St. Louis in the 90s, and when you're standing around waiting for the next band to go on, there's music blaring at the sound guy's selection. And Ska Sucks would come on so often. Like I would be like I'd be at like a Diesel Boy show or something like that, and freaking Ska Sucks would come on in between bands, and I was like, oh God, this song, because I loved Propaganda so much, even back then, and I was like, oh God, this song, oh my God, and it would come on so often. So, but Whole Lotta Milka, you're totally right. The impression that I get of that band in Winnipeg is that they are very well known across the scene in Winnipeg, and they're kind of like, I hate kind of like local legends within the music scene. And whenever I ask folks who are from Winnipeg if they like Whole Lotta Milka, they're like, love them. Great band, fantastic songs, great band all the way through. Like not even just this one song. It's not like a one hit kind of thing. Like they just are a very well respected group of musicians up there, and it's really funny that this is the first way that I was ever able to hear them, because I never would have heard of this band because I don't think they really are active anymore, are they?
They're not active, and I don't think that they toured much. So, for people like us who weren't in that scene,
sure,
it just didn't get out. But so what's funny is like, I think some of the lyrics of that song are so funny because they're addressing specific lines of Ska Sucks, and the one that like sticks out to me the most is the bands are only in it for the bucks.
Yeah,
there's a line in there. Well, let me see. I think I have it here. I can't find it, but it's something about like we play for peanuts, and we had to steal our saxophone. That's like,
God, what's the saxophone story?
So the saxophone story. So he brought this up because he's like, oh, Chris says their bands are only in it for the bucks, but we stole our saxophone. Like that's his illustration of how much they were not doing it for the bucks.
Yeah.
They were so not making money that they couldn't even afford instruments.
Didn't they steal it from a school or something?
They stole it from a school, kind of. It was more like a school lent them it and they didn't return it.
I love it.
That was really
Oh my God. Okay. Well, is there anything else that like you found out during this research process surrounding propaganda, whole lot of Milka, Winnipeg, any other little nuggets that you feel like dropping into listeners' ears?
I'm going to read. This isn't really that important to the bigger scheme of things, but this is like probably like the thing that cracks me up the most from the chapter I wrote.
Go for it.
So when Whole Lotta Milka released that song, oh, by the way, Whole Lotta Milka, I think it was 1998. Yeah, it was 1998 when they released it. So that also gives you a little sense of the time. This is 5 years after Ska Sucks, but it's right in the midst of the ska revival being mainstream. So I think that kind of also shows you that they're talking to the people that are using it as a way to diss mainstream ska and all the other ska bands too.
Well, and hilariously, really quick before you get into your reading here, if anybody out there has a CD copy of Where Quantity is Job Number One, I've got it right here on my desk, and you can open up the liner notes and you can see where it says Ska Sucks, and it says, "See how to clean for the brilliant lyrics to the opus that inspired ska bands to write songs about Chris. Oh dear," which is so awesome because we're telling the backstory of that ska band right now, writing songs about Chris. And, it's right here in Propaganda's lyric booklet, which is just absolutely fantastic. And you know that Chris and Todd and Jorb were having a really good time when they put that together.
Oh, yeah. And Greg told me during the interview regarding those liner notes that was like, he just felt like that was the greatest honor, was that little
hell yeah
joke jab thing in those liner notes. It was just, he couldn't have been like more proud about that.
Oh, heck yeah. Because like you can have that on your because already by then in 98, like people know the Propaganda is a great band. And like you have that CD on your shelf forever. And like no matter what, like Propaganda could have faded away after 2 LPs. They could have gone on to do everything that they did. And you still got that as like a little keepsake of like, that's me. That's about me. It's so great. I love it.
So when they released A Message to You, Chris, I think so not everyone was a big fan of the song of their fans and people in the ska scene. And I think this kind of talks about how people interpreted Ska Sucks differently and people interpreted the response differently. I think some people, they saw the response as it being a knee-jerk defense, and they didn't want to seem defensive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think the truth is that it was done with a sense of humor, right?
Absolutely.
Message to you. And it's funny because before I interviewed Chris and stuff, I was reading some message board stuff, and people were just going like, "Oh my God, the ska band that wrote a response." Like they didn't catch the humor in it. They thought it was like, oh, like they're so insecure that they have to write a response song. It's like, no, they think it's funny,
Yeah. Oh, it's awesome. And like, they probably run into each other around Winnipeg here and there. It's like, oh, hey man, how's it going? Like, oh, you're that guy. Yeah. Which absolutely is awesome.
So Chris, I'm sorry. So Greg from Whole Lotta Milka, he sent me a fan letter that they got in 1998 from somebody who was upset about them, writing a response song to Ska Sucks. And it is the funniest thing. So I'm going to read it to you because this is my favorite paragraph in the book, in the chapter. It says, and funnily enough, this kid who wrote this to them was also named Chris.
Nice.
So it says, "Your song is just an insult to the intelligence of Propaganda fans, not to mention a waste of one of your best dance riffs. Just because Chris says ska sucks doesn't mean we aren't going to support ska bands anymore. We aren't that dumb most of the time."
Oh my God, I love it. And it's also very funny that the person who wrote that is also named Chris. It's like, I wonder if this is a code. That's so great.
And he just felt the need to write it. I think that's the funniest part. Like, I gotta give me a pen. I gotta write this band.
Well, and I wonder if if that letter probably came from within Canada, most likely, but wouldn't that be funny if somebody paid international postage to mail that letter to Whole Lotta Milka in Winnipeg? Like, I would just find that to be so funny if the person who wrote that was in like Jacksonville, Florida. I got to write to this ska band who wrote about Propaganda. It's just so good. I wonder if Greg still has the postage on it.
So in terms of like your other question about, my research and stuff, would actually still, if it ever happened, I still would love to interview Chris, because I don't feel like I have all the answers still to this whole story. There's still questions that I have, and some of them I kind of fleshed out through research with Greg and some of the directions he took me on. But this is my main question that I don't have fully answered about the history and legacy of Ska Sucks. Did it work is the question that I would love to ask Chris about Ska Sucks and the Nazi problem. Did it work? Did the Nazis go away? Did they hear the song, take offense, and leave? Or did they respond violently? What did they do exactly, these Nazis that they wrote the song for and played it for? Now, what Greg told me is that the Nazi problem did go away shortly after, but he also told me that there was other stuff happening at that time. There was one of them had like killed a guy or something, and it was like deemed a hate crime because he was gay, and seemed like it might have been a motivating factor, and the police suddenly ramped up their attention on them, and the ones that weren't in jail were kind of went in hiding. So from my point of view, it's hard to tell if what the effect of the song was versus what happened in that scene. But I would love to hear more like anecdotes from Chris, like, yeah, first time we played Ska Sucks, this is how they reacted, and that kind of thing. Yeah. That's probably my number one biggest question for him.
Well, Aaron, I'm so glad that you said that, because that is a question that I likely would have overlooked in our conversation just now. And you, as an experienced journalist, you were able to intuit a missing piece of the puzzle that I wasn't asking. So I'm actually super grateful to you for just going there and bringing that up, because I probably wouldn't have asked you, what would you ask Chris if you could ask him, which is such an obvious and perfect question. So I'm really glad for your years of journalism experience right there.
Sure.
And here's you saw that.
Here's my second and final question that I would ask him.
Wonderful.
So on Turned Out a Punk, he said, the only people that were supposed to hear this song are the dozen skinheads at the Albert. He's basically saying, he wrote it for those people, and it wasn't supposed to get out. It wasn't supposed to become viral. It wasn't supposed to be this anti-ska thing. So my question for him would be, what was the motivating factor for recording it in 1993 on your Fat Records record? Was it, obviously they probably didn't realize that they still at that point were going to become as big as they were going to become. And I'm sure they had no idea ska was going to become big. And they probably had no idea also that ska was, that ska haters were going to like kind of hold on to it. But I'm still kind of curious why, if it was such a purposeful song, why he put it on a Fat Records album in like 4 years later.
Yeah. Well, and I'm also wondering if, in 1992, 1993, Fat Records wasn't like the empire that it became.
Sure. Yeah. That's definitely, yeah.
And I'm also wondering if Fat Mike had anything to do with it as like an intuitive musical person who knows how to sell records. If he saw something in that song and said, you must record this. Like, I wonder if they were actually like told, like, this has to be on the record. You know what I mean? Because I wouldn't even doubt it, because, you run a record label, you've got costs and overhead and expenses, and, you want to be able to put food on the table for your family. So you sell some records and you put some songs on there that'll do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's my theory.
I think that's a pretty good theory. And so, like, to your a comment you made earlier, Greg did tell me that he did run into Chris after their response song came out, and he said they saw each other at a Public Enemy show, like outside in Winnipeg, and he said Chris recognized him, and he said, "You," and they all kind of laughed.
So, I love it. Oh man, I wonder if their circles overlaps at all,
Yeah, so it sounds like he's got a sense of humor about the response song. Maybe even more of a sense of humor about it than maybe his own song, which he's, obviously pretty sick of.
Oh yeah. So Aaron, we didn't even really get to talk about the rest of your book a whole heck of a lot.
Sure,
Can you sort of preview for listeners who are potential readers? And I would absolutely encourage everybody to pre-order this book. I already did. And so tell us what they can expect in the rest of this book that you have put together.
Sure. Ska Sucks, that chapter actually is a really good like standalone chapter because it's kind of a shorter, concise story. And I tried to do that as much as possible. I wanted each chapter to stand alone as a standalone essay that didn't necessarily need the other chapters, but they all work together to talk about the larger concept of how ska is, viewed in culture and what these stories are that you've never heard because, ska's not given the attention that it should. So Ska Sucks, the story of Ska Sucks is one of them. I have some like long chapters. I have some short chapters. Like for instance, my longest chapter in the book is called Rude Boys Don't Win. And it is it's all about how ska came to the US right after two-tone. Like two-tone was like cult underground music. Those bands did not hit big audiences in the US, but they did get loyal, rabid fans. The Specials, Madness, those bands came to the US and they played 400 or 500, capacity clubs, packed, people going crazy. And then most of those bands broke up right after that, or in the case of Madness or English Beat, kind of moved away from ska, became more pop bands. So ska as a movement never grew legs from two-tone. But what did happen was that a bunch of American ska bands formed in major cities in the early 80s. And, the Untouchables in LA, the Toasters in New York.
Oh, yeah.
And they, people know them because they continued on and started Moon Records.
Yeah.
Bim Scala Bim in Boston.
Yep.
The Uptones in San Francisco, or not San Francisco, Berkeley. The Crazy Eights in Portland, Oregon. So two-tone inspired all of these bands in major cities, and they built these incredible underground scenes in their own city. Every one of those bands was like the biggest band in their city. The Untouchables would play really big venues. They were mods. They had scooters, and they had like legions of mod fans, just scooters just lined up outside the door,
Nice.
outside of the venues. So all through the 80s, you had this happen, and it continued to grow and evolve, but it just never was, labels weren't interested. It was never able to become mainstream, but it stayed consistently popular in underground. So I tell the story of how two-tone kind of didn't really go beyond cult status, and that American ska was like an evolving, vibrant thing for 15 years that, just never had anything. And then it was like 95, 96 when all of a sudden these kind of newer bands were the ones that caught the radio and MTV attention. And like, for the most part, the old bands, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones being the one exception, didn't catch that attention at all. Mighty Mighty Boss Tones did start in the 80s. But they were a heavier punker metal ska kind of band.
Dude, those first like 4 Boss Tones records are pretty unimpeachable.
Oh yeah.
They're pretty incredible. I actually went back and revisited those recently, and I was like, holy smokes, this is rad.
It's interesting.
I was really surprised.
I like their early stuff, and I do like their big albums too. But it's interesting to listen to, like, say, the Scott Core and the Devil and More, which is really raw and just aggressive, and then you compare that to their big 1997 album. I can't remember off the top of my head. Let's Face It.
Let's Face It. Yeah.
That album is so polished. It's a good album. It's like a good pop album, but it is incredibly polished. It is night and day in terms of its production. The songwriting is not that different. I mean, it's still the same band, but yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
So that's an example. That's like one of the longest chapters. It's a pretty in-depth history of how ska the ska's place in the US as underground culture for 15 years. was one of just evading mainstream popularity. Oh, it's like time and time again, you had these bands, they'd build these big scenes, no interest at all. And then eventually, this new band, the crop did. So I have like more journalistic stuff like that. I also have chapters where it's like I tell stories of my old band, just tell like little sort of personal stories, kind of throw that in there. I tell some thematic type stories. Like I talk about the history of the ska fashions, whether it's like the rude boy stuff, the skinhead stuff, the mod stuff. These are all sort of co-evolving in England. The rude boy actually obviously goes back to Jamaica, but skinheads, rude boys, and mods did evolve in England, and they had different histories, and they came to the US and other countries, and they continued to change and evolve. The whole skinhead thing is super complicated. Skinheads started out in the late 60s. It was sort of a neutral thing. It wasn't racist. It wasn't really anti-racist either. It was just these working class whites that were into the music and the fashion, and they were skinheads. And the race, there was a racist version of it that sort of evolved in the 70s, Nazi skinheads, a mutation of it. But then skinhead became anti-racist through two-tone, which is an interesting, like, lesser known history. Jerry Dammers, the keyboardist and sort of the leader of the Specials and Two Tone, the record label, he was aware of the fascism and racism problem in England and how it was coming through the skinhead, and also that they were doing the ska revival thing, and that the skinhead was part of early England's ska and reggae sort of subculture. And so he kind of took it on and said, yes, ska and skinhead are related. And in order to be part of ska, you're anti-racist. Like, he kind of, like, in a way, he kind of invented these things, but he did it on purpose because he was trying to stop this really bad thing that he saw. And the idea of being an anti-racist skinhead sort of became like the norm in a weird way. Like, it was like from the 70s and 80s on, there continued to be a faction of racist skinheads and vehemently anti-racist skinheads, almost like there was stopped being a middle ground. And that definitely started with the Specials and Two Tone kind of insisting on that point.
Oh my goodness. Well, I can see why Mike from Hard Girls was so clear in his assessment of your book about having it, how, it's just such a neat historical exploration of this genre. And I'm personally very excited for it. It's going to make my April really, really nice when it shows up in my mailbox. I'm very excited by it. I've been reading so much music stuff lately. Like, I read that Bad Religion book. I read the No Effects book. I read Jack Grisham's really, really wild book recently. And so and I got Jack McFeeder's book from Born Against. He's got a book called, it's like a history of like Southern California hardcore. I haven't dove into it yet, but yeah, this is really just going to sit nicely on my shelf with my others in this musical journey that I'm on.
Well, that's great. Like, I think part of what I was after too is I was trying to hope to get people who aren't, beyond just hardcore ska fans. Like, hey, you don't have to be a hardcore ska fan to find all of this stuff interesting.
For sure.
It's totally interesting. It's compelling. It's, and that's part of my mission. That's part of why I kind of gave it that provocative kind of title, was a little bit of a dare to people who are not like, worship at the altar of ska. It's like, hey, I dare you to dive in deep and read about ska and not be intrigued and compelled and stuff.
Oh, the history is so great. I mean, just what I learned when I was doing some research for our first Ska Sucks episode, I was just like, I am such a moron for how much I overlooked all this stuff. So I'm really like excited because I know that your book is going to take me down a couple more rabbit holes of learning and listening to some damn good tunes. So Aaron, go ahead.
There's some fun stuff too. Like, I tried to really mix it up. Like, I think there's a phenomenon in ska where, and actually it's happening right now, oddly enough, where people become obsessed with celebrities with a ska past in a way that they do not become obsessed with people with a past with any other musical genre. And it's happening right now with Oscar Isaac,
Oh, interesting.
who actually, this has been going on. I wrote about it in the book because this first came out like 5 years ago, that he was in a ska band in the 90s, or a couple of them. And people just like have so much fun with this, like, oh my God, Oscar Isaac used to be in a ska band. Like it's sort of like this, the implied message is that he's, he's cool now, but he didn't used to be.
Oh my God.
So I wrote a whole chapter about that whole, that whole thing, about how that culture does that they really tack on to ska past as this source of significance. Like, I talk about him. I talk about there was a time, I don't know if you remember this, where the Killers and the Bravery were kind of beefing with each other. And like they were calling out each other's ska past as like the ultimate dagger.
Oh, nice.
It was hilarious. I interviewed electronic music musician Dan Deacon, who has like a ska past. He used to be in this band called Channel 59, and they were like pretty amazing, kind of weirdo ska band. But they weren't that big. He did the band, and then eventually he became sort of like this kind of indie electronic dude that people got a lot of respect for. And then a few years after he kind of got, like popular on Pitchfork and those types of sites, Stereo Gum, they published this article. They're like, Dan Deacon used to be in a ska band. It was like almost like there was no meat to the article. It was just, we're outing him.
Oh my
And he was
God.
telling me how, like, embarrassed or, afraid he was that he was about to like lose all credibility, but then eventually he kind of just, accepted it and leaned into it and was like, yes, I used to be a ska band guy, and he was totally down with it now. But it's just, just goes to show you just kind of how ska is treated in culture.
Man, I love it. Well, I'm excited for your examination to, shine a new light on it for people who do have that limited and narrow perspective on it. And
Sure.
I hope that people who don't really consider themselves ska fans, or maybe they had like an interest in it when they were like younger and like they've gotten out of it, I hope they'll reconsider and revisit your book, because it's the parts that I've read so far are very smooth, they go down well, they're engaging and gripping for readers. So I think that you did a really good job, and I'm excited to see the rest of it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. So Aaron, where can people find you if they want to follow your progress and your projects and updates in the coming months?
So my website is just aaroncarnes.com. That's AARONCARNES.com. I have a Substack newsletter that I've been doing for about a month and a half.
Okay.
And that's I think it's just Aaron Carnes, Substack Aaron Carnes, but it's on my website. You can go to my website and click there. And I've been posting every Wednesday morning. I've been posting something. It's either something I pulled from the book or expanding on from the book. And I'm actually working on some new pieces that weren't in my book, like currently, that I'm going to put out in 2021. Like I did just like a few weeks ago, I did this in-depth interview with the dude who wrote that viral song, the Jesus Is a Friend of Mine.
Oh, yeah.
So I got the full story. I interviewed him. I interviewed a few other people, and I'm waiting to hopefully see if I can interview the original, or one of the other people in that group, just to really tell this full story. But it's a weird, interesting story, actually. And, I got other stuff too. There's this band called Bad Operation. They're like this brand new New Orleans band who are
I've seen
amazing.
you posting about them. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Great, amazing band. Anybody that's like interested in discovering new ska, or if they have a belief that there's no new good ska bands, they should definitely go check out Bad Operation, because
Cool.
that'll convince them. But when I interviewed them about their new album, they just kind of randomly told me that, oh yeah, back in Katrina impacted the ska scene back in in the 2000s. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, well, there was nothing to do after Katrina, and there was no place that parents felt safe for their kids to go. So the only place that people were okay with and parents okay with were these all ages ska shows.
Mm.
So Katrina effectively created this vibrant all ages ska scene in New Orleans for, I don't know the full story yet because we haven't fully researched it, but that's that's a story that I'm working on that I'm hoping to uncover sometime next year. It'll be on my newsletter.
That is freaking great. I love that. Creating something positive out of tragedy is, I feel like, a common theme across all of human existence.
I just feel like, too, with ska, I just like, as much as people write off ska, you just find it in all these little weird, unexpected corners. Like, I was completely blown away when they told me that, and I don't even know the full story. I just like, really? Why have I never heard anything about this? I mean, I've studied so much ska, and I've even studied a bunch about Katrina, and I've never heard this before. It's just like all these hidden corners.
Man, and we didn't even talk about like the whole like ska punk movement of like Less Than Jake, Slapstick,
sure,
Link 80. Oh my God, there's so many good ones. I love it. So I'm like super pumped. I feel like I have to make like a new Spotify playlist for myself tomorrow for my run or something.
Sure,
where I can go back and find all this.
I have a I don't know if you want this link, but I have a Spotify playlist that's like a soundtrack to my book. I'll send it to you. If you want to put it to your readers. Yeah.
I would love it. And I will post it. I will tweet that thing out. All right. Well, Propagandy fans who are listening to this episode, definitely go check out Aaron Carnes' new book, In Defense of Ska. Aaron, is there a subtitle?
Or no subtitle.
In Defense of Ska. Love it.
In Defense of Ska. Yeah, we had that discussion with my publisher. They're like, because it's typical. You do a nonfiction book, it's like the title, and then the subtitle is to kind of explain what the book's really about. And I was just like, can we just call it In Defense of Ska? That's just the perfect title. And they're like, all right, we'll do that.
So great. Well, Aaron, I have punished you for an hour, and I hope you've had as much fun as I have.
Oh, I've had a great time. Thank you.
And I hope you'll get some enjoy. I hope the listeners will get a great amount of enjoyment out of our appendix episode for Ska Sucks by Propagandy, because all these stories are so cool. So Aaron, thank you so much for being here on Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandy. It has been a real delight.
Thank you.
That's for the real smut. If we were in it for the money, then wouldn't you guess? We wouldn't be so goddamn in debt. Playing for peanuts at every show. Forced to steal our saxophones. So Chris, I don't want to hit your bones. Hey Chris Hanna, does ska really suck? Hey Chris Hanna, does ska really suck? And I know if you ever hear this song, you'll just give it the middle finger. I know that's your whole attitude, an attempt to offend and be so rude. I'm rude as well, but in a different way, and I'm telling ya, this guy's here to stay. I hope you listen, but I know you won't. You got a record on that and we don't. You have so many kids listen to what you say, so why do you try to aggravate? You say don't conform, but they conform to follow you. Isn't that what you told them not to do? Chris, you hypocrite, you. Hey Chris Hanna, does ska really suck? Hey Chris Hanna, does ska really suck? We were in it for the money, then wouldn't you guess? really suck. Hey, Chris, Hannah, Ska really suck.
Greg, Jeff, and Sam, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Hi,
Thanks for having us.
So we got a trio of guests on our Ska Sucks deluxe bonus appendix, whatever you want to call it, episode, following up my interview that I did earlier with Aaron Carnes, author of In Defense of Ska, which is coming out. But I just want to start off by having each of you introduce yourself for a second. So Sam, can we start off with you? Can you tell the audience of the podcast who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Sam. I host a podcast called Witch Police Radio. I've been interviewing Winnipeg musicians of all genres for the past 8 years or so. You know, it comes out twice weekly. And in the context of this conversation, I grew up listening to ska in Winnipeg. I was in a band called Grandpa's Army that was relatively unsuccessful. But, you know, I was a big fan of Whole Lotta Milka. I think that seeing Whole Lotta Milka in the first place was kind of what inspired me to actually start a ska band in the first place, because I was already listening to that kind of music, but I didn't realize it could actually be done, you know, locally, and seeing them live was really a big inspiration there. So I'm happy to be part of this too, because it's a band that, you know, I really liked growing up and I still listen to.
Awesome. Well, Sam, and you and I have gone back like several months now. We were involved in the Manitoba Podcast Festival with you, which you essentially spearhead, which is fantastic. So I have loved collaborating with you, and I'm really glad that you could bring your encyclopedic knowledge of Winnipeg music history onto the podcast to, you know, talk about all kinds of great stuff tonight. So I'm delighted to have you. So Jeff, can you tell the audience of the Unscripted Moments podcast about propaganda a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Jeff Crow. In a previous life, I was the baritone saxophone player for Whole Lotta Milka back in the late 90s and in the Winnipeg ska scene. I don't do anything musically related anymore. I'm an IT manager for the University of Calgary now. So I am way out of the music scene now.
Are you over in Calgary? Did you move over to Calgary?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Did you play in any other bands in Winnipeg? Were you always a saxophone player? Were you in any other instruments?
Yeah, I'm a one-band wonder. Only Whole Lotta Milka because Crow made me, and well, that's not true. But
well,
yeah, that's it.
I think if you could be known for one band, I mean, I think that you did pretty well for only being in one band.
Cool.
Yeah. And Greg, last but not least, my namesake, my name twin on the episode, so hopefully it won't be super confusing. But Greg, can you introduce yourself a little bit to the audience of Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda?
Yeah, sure. My name is Greg Crow, and I played in bands in between 1992 and 2015, mostly ska bands. And yeah, I played guitar and sang in Whole Lotta Milka with Jeff.
Awesome. What are some of the other bands that you were in that people might know you from?
After Whole Lotta Milka, I started a band called the Wedgwoods. And then shortly after that, I started to do a solo project of sorts that kind of morphed into a band called the Scarlet Union.
Nice, nice. Did you ever take any of those bands on the road or anything like that?
Yeah, I did a little more with the Scarlet Union, but the Wedgwoods did go out on tour one time. More, you know, just on a laugh more than anything else.
Nice. I'm wondering if our paths may have overlapped. I lived in Saskatoon. I did my master's at the University of Saskatchewan in 2009 through 2011. Did you ever play Amigos or anything like that when you were in any of those bands during that era?
We never played Amigos, did we, Jeff?
No, Lydia's.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Very good. Yes, I've been to Lydia's many, many times. Were you there in 2009 through 2011 by any chance?
No, I actually heard it had closed down at one point, but I'm a little out of touch, so I'm not sure.
Oh, that makes me so sad. Poor Lydia's. I hope it's still there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about why we're here. So we're here on this podcast that I make about propaganda, a band from all of your hometown. I quite notably am not from Winnipeg. I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri in the U.S., and now I live in Buffalo. And so I'm 5 minutes from Canada, but still on this side. And so I want to talk a little bit about Winnipeg and get a little bit of your stories before we dive into some of the purpose for our conversation, which is to talk about, you know, this legacy of Ska Sucks and things like that. But Sam, when did you get into music? Did you have any like formative moments that like kind of led you down this path of being so interested in music that you pursued playing, but then also have been talking about bands and music in the local scene with Witch Police for the last several years?
I think it was just figuring out that I was able to badly play an instrument, and I had other friends who could badly play instruments, and we could play 3 chords and start a band. And those bands were always terrible, but that kind of, leads you into getting shows, meeting other people in the community. And a lot of my friends today are people that, I played shows with in like 98 or something the first time, and I still see them, all these years later. So I think that just like becoming part of that community, even though none of my bands ever went anywhere or were ever successful or ever toured beyond like, a couple small towns in Manitoba, but just kind of being part of it that way really piqued my interest, I guess, in it.
Nice. Jeff, what about you? How did you get into like playing saxophone? What was like the impetus there? Was it like a 7th grade jazz band or something like that?
Pretty much. Crow and I went to the same school in, sorry, I call him Crow.
That's fine.
Even though my last name is Crow. I know it's very confusing. I just go with it. We did junior high and senior high band together. We did jazz band, all that kind of stuff together. So we were just total, like your stereotypical band geeks from that era. That was us. We were total band nerds.
Nice. Greg, what did you do in band? Were you always in guitar? Did you start somewhere else? How did you get into playing music and writing and composing and all that?
Mostly like Jeff said, like from the public school system. And it's what I do now. I now teach. I'm a high school band teacher.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah. So I was playing trombone and tuba in bands in school. And then I loved it so much, I went on to study at post-secondary. And just as I was graduating from high school is when we put Whole Lotta Milka together for the first time.
Nice. Are you in the Winnipeg public school system right now teaching?
In Manitoba. I teach in a small town called Oakbank, Manitoba, but I taught in Winnipeg for 19 years before that.
Wow, fantastic. Well, I'm an English, philosophy, and religious studies teacher, as you can tell by my geeky T-shirt with all my religious symbolism all over it. This is my class T-shirt for the senior class that I teach. Awesome. So we got another teacher on board. I love it. Okay, so I want to hear from each of you here, and I'm not 100% sure how to go about doing this since there's so many of us involved, but I need to know about the Winnipeg ska scene back in the day. I mean, I guess you can go as far back as you know about, but I guess tell me, I'm curious about some major bullet points about what you can remember, what the major bands were, if there were like, what the dynamic of the scene was like. Does anybody feel like they have it in them to tackle this immense 7-part question that I have just posed?
I can start there if you'd like.
Great. Let's do it, Greg.
Pass it over to the other guys. I was playing in a straight edge hardcore band from 1992 to 93. And there was a drummer in that band. He and I were good buddies at the time. And I remember him saying to me very specifically, it's fun playing hardcore, but wouldn't it be cool to start a big old ska band? My friend Rich, he's a drummer. I could come off the drums and I could sing. Wouldn't that be fun to put a ska band together? And we started talking about this, and his name was Adam. Jeff, you'll remember Adam probably.
Of course.
And it never came to fruition, but he had kind of planted that seed in my brain. Now, that band that I was playing in, we had our difficulties and we broke up, but I ran with that idea and I started to talk to good buddies of mine, Jeff included in that, saying, how would you like to start a ska band with me? And we can get that going. And the drummer that Adam was talking about, my buddy Rich, who plays drums, he ended up starting another ska band called the Umpires. So a Whole Lotta Milka and the Umpires kind of grew up out of the ashes of like the summer of 1993. And there was a band at the time called JFK and the Conspirators that was around. I think they grew out of a band named the Operatives. I may be a little bit confused about that. Like I was saying to you before you start recording, that a lot of these memories are over 20 years old. So yeah. They're a little bit foggy. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there that these are things as I remember them. But I remember in May of 1994, JFK and the conspirators put on this ska party and invited us to play with them. And then right around that time was when the umpires started playing shows. So it was right around the summer of 1994 where there were 3 established bands. There was Whole Lotta Milka, JFK and the Conspirators, and the umpires. And that kind of lasted up until about 1999, when I think Sam's band had come on the scene along with another band called the Racketeers.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That
Excellent.
was, I didn't hear Whole Lotta Milka until, when did the first album come out?
January of 97.
So that was probably around the time, not January necessarily, but 97, 98 is when I first heard you guys. And there was kind of that whole other wave of bands. Like there was Grandpa's Army, there was the Racketeers, there was a lot of punk bands who were kind of, incorporating little ska parts in what they were doing. And it seemed like almost it was a new sort of set of bands. And Whole Lotta Milka was still there, and JFK and the Conspirators were still there. But I think that was right around the time that ska kind of got really big, like internationally too. Like that would have been Mighty Mighty Boss Tones kind of breaking it into the mainstream and stuff too around then. So I think I wasn't there for the first stuff you were just talking about because I was too young. But when I was a teenager and playing in some of those shows, they were big shows. Like the West End Cultural Center would have like 5 ska bands on, and it would be packed, which seems crazy now because I don't think that would happen today necessarily. But it was a lot of hype around it.
What kind of capacity of shows were these venues filling up?
The West End's what, like 500?
No, not. I don't think we never had a show. I mean, we never played a show on. Maybe when we opened for Goldfinger, there was maybe that many people.
Yeah, that was at that show. That was packed. Yeah, but no, but even the Halloween shows, there must have been a couple hundred kids there.
Maybe.
Yeah,
every fall.
After the Winnipeg boom, which was probably around 2000, 2001, like Halloween was an annual event that we would put on, we as a community, I guess, but there was usually, a few people running point. So I didn't really have my hand in it in a big way when it first hit the boom. But when it was at its peak, it became a 3-night event.
Nice.
Which is crazy to think about.
Crazy.
Yeah, where they would do like 2 nights at a very large venue, and then there would be like kind of an up-and-comers band night that would be done like at a community club, as I remember it. Sam, you might remember.
That sounds right. Yeah, there'd be those ones would have like 20 bands on it or something, and then the big shows would have 3 or 4 kind of more established ones.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Jeff, do you have any specific memories of like the scene in like that 93 to like 99 kind of that period of time?
We didn't get, I just don't remember that being super sold out. So where'd we play? West End, Albert. What was that band on downtown there? That place?
Wellington's we played at quite a bit.
Yeah. No, the Pyramid.
The Pyramid, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, most of these places are just kind of a bar with a dance floor. West End was nice because it was you could do all ages shows there. Because it's basically just community hall, a good stage too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most of our bigger shows though were when another out of town band came. Did we open for Real Big Fish?
Yeah,
I think you did. Yeah, I was at that one too.
Yeah, I can't remember. That was later on. Remember the Messenger show, Carl?
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
They had so much crap on the stage that we couldn't even. We opened for them. We could barely stand on the stage. They had so many things. Like the drum kit was just ridiculous.
Yeah. It was loud as shit. Like it was but like when the bass player was playing, like you could feel like your heart trying to make its way through your rib cage. Like it was heavy duty.
Man, it sounds so great because all the things that you're saying remind me so much of the ska scene in St. Louis that I was growing up in, like 98, 99, 2000. We had these huge events called Ska-O-Rama, which one of the offshoot bands from MU330, they were called Orange Tree. They would headline and there would be like 8 or 9 bands. They would play this massive ballroom that was like on the historic register in St. Louis, and it was just this unbelievably huge theater where it goes back to like the 1910 1920 era, and we just had these massive ska festivals, Ska-O-Rama, and it was an annual thing. So many of the things that you're saying, I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's like it happened in my own life as well, because I have these very distinct memories of watching these bands and just rocking out. And so I love it. I'm loving that there was this massively dynamic scene going on in Winnipeg as well, because you guys were just straight north from me in St. Louis. It's really cool.
Well,
Love it.
one of the things that was mentioned earlier too is that I think that one of the positive things about the ska scene was it invited a lot of people who weren't necessarily already involved in the punk scene or the hardcore scene kind of into the community. I mean, like, when my terrible band started, there was 4 of us. We were playing bad hardcore songs, and then it just turned out that our drummer also played piano in a swing band in like this this jazz thing. And so a bunch of people from that band, he knew a bunch of horn players, and none of them had ever been to a punk show or been to the Albert or done anything like that. But then they suddenly joined our band, and I'm terrible at my instrument. Most of us were just awful, and these guys came in and they actually knew what they were doing, and things just suddenly got better. And I think a lot of bands, I mean, you guys maybe had the same experience, but benefited from having people who had this really cool musical training that a lot of the punk bands didn't have.
Nice. Yeah. Well, okay. So let's dive in a little bit to the other aspect of the show that we're talking about. So I feel like we have a really good context here for where we're going to go now. So Greg, let's talk to you really quick. What is your fandom history like of Propaganda? Like, when did they become like on your radar? Are you a fan? Do you like them, etc.?
Yeah, I remember very, very clearly the first time I saw Propaganda that wasn't on TV. There was a dude who had a public access show here in Winnipeg. His name was Johnny Sizzle. He's still quite active.
Still active, yeah.
Yeah, the Sizzler. He's very, very cool. And he had Propaganda like on his show, and had an opportunity to go see Propaganda. And I can tell you the exact year too, because I remember they were talking about Canada 125. So it was like they were talking about like Canada's 125th anniversary, and this is 125 years of colonialism and racism, and they had a Canadian flag on stage that they tried to set on fire. This all happened at the Albert, and I think there was about 30 people there. And I had this little cassette tape of their demo, and hearing those songs live in a club with that band on stage, it was very powerful for me. I wanted to do that. And so Propaganda had quite an impact on me, to be honest.
Nice. Jeff, what about you?
I'm the wrong guy to ask, man. I don't know if I've ever heard more than 2 songs of Propaganda.
I love it. That's totally fine. Sam, what about you? Tell me about, because Sam, you and I connected about Propaganda months and months ago. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the role they play in your life, like how they came into your life when you first heard them, etc.
Well, I first heard them around the time Let's Talk More Rock came out, because, again, I'm a little younger, and that was kind of prime high school years for me there. And the reason I kind of glommed onto them was because, I grew up vegetarian, and this was the first time I'd heard anyone singing anything that remotely related to, that I could relate to like that. I mean, obviously there are other bands that were singing about animal rights stuff and being vegan and things like that, but this was the first one I heard, the first local one. And ever since basically, hearing the second song on that album, I was immediately hooked on them. And I've been a fan ever since. I mean, not just because of that. I mean, their music's great too. But no, it's really cool that someone that good is from Winnipeg, and they seem to consistently get better with every release, which is insane, because usually it happens the other way around, where a band that's been around for this long will start to kind of taper off at some point, but they haven't, which is cool.
Yeah, they grow with me. I was talking to a guy that I recently interviewed for the show who's going to be on a forthcoming episode. And he's like, yeah, every episode, they seem to hit me where I am in my life, whether I'm, a little bike riding punk in a city, or whether I'm trying to change my diet, or whether I just had children. He's like, they always seem to hit me right in the heart about where I am in my life, which is pretty cool, because I agreed with him. So on May 31st, 1993, How to Clean Everything is released by Propaganda on Fat Records, including the notorious song that we're here to talk about, Ska Sucks. And I'm curious, Greg, maybe we can start with you. Did you have any relation, were you already a fan of the band when this record came out at the time?
Yeah, I remember exactly where I was when I first heard that record. I was walking home from work, and somebody had given me a copy of it to listen to, like, you got to hear the new Propaganda. And I'm walking home, and this humongous smile just formed on my face, because all the demo recordings that I had heard are now sounding super pristine and clear and powerful.
Mhm.
And yeah, like I knew about Ska Sucks and about their position and what have you, and a little bit about the history of the song as I understand it, at least. So yeah, that was quite a moment for me.
Nice, nice. When you're talking about the demo, are you talking about the martial law demo?
Yeah, like martial law with a cherry on top.
Yeah, yeah. Do you
Yeah.
still have that?
No, I lost it. I don't know
Dang
where it is.
it.
I know.
I'm always, every time people bring that cassette up on the show, I'm like, do you have it? Like I was talking to Todd Kowalski, and he's like, I don't have it either. And I'm like, oh. So I'm trying to get like eyeballs on one of these, like on the show. It's like my mission right now. So, Sam, what about you? Do you remember when you first came across How to Clean Everything? And, before we get into Ska Sucks?
Yeah, I had to backtrack, right? Because like I said, the first record of theirs I heard was Let's Talk More Rock. And then I loved that. So I immediately went out and found what else they had at the time. And that was what they had at the time. And love that too.
Nice. Okay. So what I want to know about now is, so you guys, a whole lot of Milka are well known for the rebuttal track to Ska Sucks, and it's very interesting to me that I'm doing a second episode on Ska Sucks because it is like hands down my least favorite propaganda song like ever.
It's
like
bad, yeah.
I hate it. And, I think I gave it a 0.5 out of 5 when we did our Ska Sucks episode. But what I did whenever we recorded that episode is I used it as an opportunity to dive into ska that I had never really listened to. So I got super into listening to Byron Lee and Jimmy Cliff and Toots and Desmond Decker and all kinds of stuff that I had maybe missed as a fan of music in general. So I used my least favorite propaganda song as like a launching pad into experiencing a variety of music that I overlooked. And I actually asked Sam, and he helped me out and sent me all kinds of great recommendations because Sam's got this like fantastic encyclopedic knowledge of 60s ska, it seems like. So Sam, I appreciate you, my friend. So tell me a little bit about what you guys know about the background of why Ska Sucks even exists as a track, because like I get the impression from Aaron that there was a lot more to the story that maybe people outside of Winnipeg were unaware of. Greg, do you have any insider knowledge on that?
I do, but I'd like to preface it by saying that it's just simply my understanding of it. And again, this information is 20 years old. It's based off of other things I've heard that other people have told me and snippets that I've heard from other podcasts where Chris Hanna is being interviewed. So I can give you my take on it, and doesn't mean it's accurate, but it's my understanding that that song was written to antagonize a particular demographic that would come into the venues. So as I understand it, Chris Hanna and Propaganda were heavily influenced by a band called Bunch of Fucking Goofs, and they just would not put up with any fascists showing up at their shows. And it changed things for them when Nazi skinheads or fascist skinheads would walk into a venue, and Bunch of Fucking Goofs would just take control and get them out of there by any means necessary. And so, as bizarre as it sounds, there was a number of times, and I'm sure Jeff will help me remember some of these moments, where we had some unsavory characters showing up to gigs. And why they're coming to hear ska music is beyond me. I don't know why, right? There's some kind of dissonance there. Like, why are you coming to hear Jamaican music?
Mm-hmm.
But they would come. And so Propaganda, as I understand that, wrote that song to antagonize and to kind of stir the pot a little bit, right? And upset these folks. That song wasn't written, as I understand it, to point the finger at JFK and the conspirators or the operatives or any other Winnipeg ska band, like it doesn't make any sense. I know that JFK and the conspirators and Propaganda played gigs together.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they have anything against the genre itself. And they've said so on numerous occasions. Jeff, can you remember moments like that?
Yeah, I don't think we had a lot of problems with those a-holes showing up at our gigs too much. I mean, we had a few very, very strong anti-racism songs back in the day. So they knew we're not really the band for them. But yeah, there was that scene in Winnipeg of neo-fascist dickweeds walking around.
Yeah. Well, and I know that your record can be found streaming online as well. I listened to it earlier today. Do you guys have any songs that you may recommend in that vein, like the anti-fascist vein, like because your record is obviously a full record. It's not just this one song, A Message to You, Chris. It's a bunch of stuff. Do you have any songs that you're like super proud of that you would recommend people go check out that you're, still thinking about all these years later?
The second album. I don't even know if the second
about the first album.
I don't even know. I don't even think the second album's streamable. We had a bit of a thing with our record label.
Yeah, I found it on YouTube, I think.
Oh, nice. Go for it.
Greg, and I think I actually saw a comment in the YouTube comments section of the records like, hey, this is my band. So I think you actually commented on the YouTube one that somebody uploaded.
Yeah. I think it's kind of nice that it's out there. Yeah.
Nice. Excellent. Sam, do you have any memories of any kind of unsavoriness at shows back in the day, like any experiences that stand out to you?
I think that by the time I came into the music scene, that was kind of thankfully ending. I mean, I definitely heard more stories from older guys about what had happened. There were a few shows I was at where some people would try to start shit and they'd get shut down pretty quickly. I mean, a lot of the time it would be like a Rock Against Racism or something, and they would just come to stir the pot and pretty much get kicked out right away. So I certainly heard stories about it, and I've read things and heard other people on podcasts and stuff talking about it. But thankfully, it was mostly over by the time I was old enough to start playing shows and go to shows.
What's really interesting, and Greg, you pointed out the hypocrisy of showing up to hear Jamaican and Jamaican-inspired music while also being, a fascist Nazi who is, most likely extremely racist individual. There's a lot of problems with that. So it seems like, by the time the 93, 94, 95, like when How to Clean Everything was coming out, like maybe that had dissipated a little bit in Winnipeg, like the scene maybe cleaned up a little bit. Does that sound right?
No.
A little later.
Later, I think.
It's a little bit later. There's one gig in particular I remember where the Pie Tasters were in town. And we, a whole lot of Milka and JFK opened up for the Pie Tasters, and Steve Jackson was on stage during their set. And I was just up at the front of the stage, just, soaking it in. And he gets on the mic and he says, there may be some trouble at the back there. I just want you to pay it no mind. Just don't worry about it. It'll go away. I'm like, what's he talking about? And after the gig was over, you could tell that there was some kind of commotion going on outside of the club. We went out on to the front of the street outside the front of the club. And Steve Jackson used to sing with one of those old school, like grill mics.
Yeah.
And he had taken that out with him, and he was holding it in his hand, ready to use it. And there were several members of the ARA there, and they were yelling, "There they go! There they go!" And I'm like, "What's going on?" It's like there's Nazi skinheads running into the alley there. They were trying to get into the club, and it was problematic, right? Like this was 1995, so things were still intense in Winnipeg. Yeah,
gotcha.
There was a court case that was going on at the time, and a lot of folks from that crew had kind of like laid low. And then once the court cases were kind of wrapping up, they were starting to surface their ugly heads again. So,
gotcha. So when do you have like a time when you were like, okay, things started to feel really positive and very welcoming and very open to everybody? Like, was there a time when you're like, okay, I feel like we're out of the woods?
2000.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. So when your record comes out, so really quick, what I want to know is like, when Ska Sucks comes out in 1993 by Propaganda, what was the reception like in the local ska scene? Like, did the bands receive it as, what it was meant to be because they knew the background of the song's creation? Or was it like, oh my God, those jerks? Like, do you remember the reception in Winnipeg itself about that song in particular within the ska scene?
Can't really recall, to be honest. I think if memory serves me, it was like we took it for what it was. Like it was a laugh, right? They were taking the piss and we were laughing too. So
nice. Excellent. I think that I've heard a bunch of covers of ska bands like Big D and the Kids Table, Against All Authority, who actually covered the Propaganda song. Did any of the bands in town or anybody like play it and kind of like co-opt it as like a joke and kind of throw it back out there? Sam, I saw you raise your hand there.
Yeah, we used to do it. Yeah.
Awesome.
And that was in part because half the people in my band didn't actually like ska. So, so I think it was kind of their way of getting back at me and a few other guys who were sort of forcing them to play this stuff. But we used to cover it for sure.
Nice. It's like taking it back, take the power and just throw it out there. So, Greg, tell me a little bit about the creation of A Message to You, Chris.
There's nothing to go too deep on here. Like, I mean, I thought it would be funny to write a rebuttal song, kind of like, you've played your card, let me play mine, and tried to use a lot of quotations, either from their liner notes or from their lyrics or actual musical riffs, and just, try to steal a bunch of their stuff and put it in. They stole from Dandy Livingston, so I thought we would take from them too. And, it was just our turn to take the piss. That's what I took it as.
Yeah, one of the lines in the song is talking about like, bands being in it for the bucks, but I heard you guys have an interesting backstory regarding a particular saxophone.
Should go read the chapter in Aaron's book.
Yeah, I loved it. Aaron,
Covers it pretty well.
And what's so great about Aaron's book is that he already has released this chapter out into the world in preview for the book's release. And I would obviously encourage everybody to go and pre-order Aaron's book In Defense of Ska, because the sections that I've read are wonderful and Aaron put a ton of work into it. So I was delighted that he tracked all of you guys down up in Winnipeg and in Alberta, which is really cool. So Sam, as someone who wasn't in Whole Lotta Milka, but you were a fan.
Yeah.
What was the conversation in the crowd like, given that everyone in the room, knew what A Message to You, Chris was about, knew about Ska Sucks? Like, were you and your buddies talking about these songs, like as fans of these bands in general?
Yeah, I actually don't remember if I ever saw them play it live. I mean, I saw you guys play live all the time, but I don't know if I ever saw you play that song live. But on the record, for sure. Like, I remember the first time I got the record, I was at my friend's house. We were listening to it, start to finish, as you do. And when that came on, it took us a second, and then we just sort of realized, oh wait, this is a diss track. This is a diss track against Propaganda. And then we listened to that a few times in a row afterwards, and it became for sure one of the highlights of the record, I think, just because it was so. I don't think I'd heard anyone outside of hip hop do a diss track before. I mean, later I obviously realized there's a long history of it, especially in Jamaican music. There's a deep history of that kind of stuff. But that was sort of my first experience. First of all, hearing local bands shit on each other, and then also hearing it in ska form, which was cool.
So I've got the liner notes here to where quantity is job number one, and under the entry for Ska Sucks, it says, for the brilliant lyrics to the opus that inspired ska bands to write songs about Chris, oh dear, which I love. And I just think that that's really cool that the people in that band that are mentioned in this Propaganda CD are sitting here with me having this conversation about this this fantastic ska scene that was in Winnipeg in the 1990s. It's just such a delight. Are there any other like major stories or Propaganda related or Winnipeg ska related that just really stand out to you as good memories, or anything positive that you'd like to add as we kind of bring our conversation in for a close tonight?
Well, there is that time we got in a knife fight with them behind the Albert. Do you want to talk about that, Crow?
Well, it was deadly.
Yeah. I've never walked the same since.
No. And we had to get a new drummer. That was not good.
Yeah.
We kind of had a rotating door on the drummer position.
The statute of limitations is done with that one, right? Like, we're not going to get in trouble by mentioning that on the air, are we?
No, we'll be fine.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. No, in all seriousness, I went to see Public Enemy in Winnipeg. I can't remember what year it was, but after the gig was over, I was leaving the venue, and there was Chris Hanna. So I said, I'm going to go talk to him. So I tapped him on the shoulder. I said, hey, Chris. And he turns around. Hey, I go, my name's Greg Crow. I used to play in a band called Whole Lotta Milka. And he went, oh, you. Like, yeah, it's me. And we actually had quite a good laugh about it. And he was like, no, I liked your song. It was good. It's like, yeah, I've been a big fan of yours for years. I just thought it was a little back and forth, a little jab here, there. He's like, no, it's great. It's great. It's fun. So he was, really cool about it. He's a really nice guy. Yeah.
Absolutely. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah. No, both bands. I love both bands still. So, I mean, I know Lotta Milka hasn't been around for a while, and Propaganda is still keeping on going. But yeah, I mean, they both get a lot of play in my record collection still. So I don't know how many people still have Lotta Milka CDs, but I still have my copies, and I'm holding on to them. So yeah, I don't know. It's cool that this is still. I assume this song has been mostly forgotten in general, right? I mean, when was the last time you guys talked about this, aside from the book thing and then this podcast now?
Yeah, it's all because of Aaron's book that
Yeah.
this will come back.
It's cool that's coming back, and maybe it means people will seek out. I don't know if you have any CDs floating around in the ether somewhere anymore, but people can maybe find the album on, like you said, on YouTube, and maybe they'll get reintroduced to Lotta Milka, and then I can subtly put pressure on you guys over the next few years to have a reunion show.
Nice. Sponsored by Witch Police Radio.
The seven of us have not been in the same room since our last show, which was 20 years ago. Yeah.
That was a good show, though. Very good show.
Oh, it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
My it's just a delight to have this podcast. So Winnipeg is such a central theme within the Propaganda universe, essentially, and me being someone who isn't from there, who has never seen Propaganda in Winnipeg, who hasn't seen live music in Winnipeg, I think that this is essential for me to have this conversation, because I just think that it sheds so much light on the context of this great band that I love so much. And, this is just all completely done in just tremendous respect for all the scenes that birth all these incredible bands that, that we all love. So I am just tremendously delighted to have all of you on the show tonight, live from Winnipeg, live from Manitoba, live from Alberta. Jeff, Greg, Sam, I'm just super grateful to all of you for being here with me to talk about this scene, these songs, these records. It's fantastic. I'm just grateful to all of you. So thank you so much for being on Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. It means a lot.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for having us, Greg.
Keep going. Keep going. Here we go. Rudy, what's a message to you, Rudy? Revival is a cure, you stupid fucks. The bands are only in it for the bucks. And if you don't believe me, you're a schmuck. But the trend will die out with any luck. Oh, oh, ow. Oh, 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 yeah! Yeah. What's that? All right.